there's one thing you guys should understand is that Grand Theft Auto might be the game to set the precedent that all video games should be $100. Now, is that something that we should look forward to, that all video games are going to be absurdly expensive? Not in my lifetime. Not in the lifetime of growing up with video games being $29.99, $39.99, and at maximum, when they started doing it, $49.99 was the standard, but then once they hit $59.99, I was like, holy cow, $59 for a video game? You're wild!
Of money, I can't deny the reality. If any game could do it, it's this one. Barring any catastrophic failure, this game will sell no matter what. I've already seen millions of players tune in just to watch a trailer. At this point, whether or not this game even meets expectations probably doesn't even matter. And that brings us to today, because now analysts are predicting that Grand Theft Auto 6 will make $7 billion in its first 2 months. In an article from Insider Gaming titled GTA 6 will make $7 billion in 2 months, it's predicted, Grant Taylor Hill writes, "It's no big secret that Grand Theft Auto 6 will likely be the biggest game launch in history. It's set to shatter records worldwide and will easily shift millions and millions of copies within minutes of hitting the shelves. One venture capitalist firm, driven by investment in gaming, has taken an analytical stance, making a bunch of predictions, including an ambitious suggestion that Grand Theft Auto 6 will generate $7.6 billion in revenue in just 60 days of launch." On LinkedIn, Convoy's Josh Chaplin posted a series of predictions based on internal chats at the firm. For those not in the know, Convoy is a firm focused on investing in platforms and technologies on the frontier of gaming. The internal analysis of Grand Theft Auto 6's future yielded a diverse platter of predictions, some more obvious than others. For instance, the team suggested that Grand Theft Auto 6 will be the greatest video game release of all time, which is almost a given. They also suggested that Grand Theft Auto 6 Online, or whatever it's going to be called, will accommodate 200-player lobbies and will host a thriving UGC component on the platform. One of the most ambitious predictions was centered around Grand Theft Auto 6's envisioned revenue. We predict Grand Theft Auto 6 will generate $7.6 billion in revenue in the first 60 days of its launch. Current release date, May 26, 2026. This will be the greatest video game release of all time, shattering player, viewership, and revenue records.
Now, if there's one thing to understand here is that this would be the greatest ever release of any video game that exists, clearly as the man stated, right? But I think bigger than that is we kind of have to understand the power that video games have been able to amass. When video games were first coming out in the late 1960s, okay, with like things like Pong and things like that, they were something to be laughed at, almost as a joke, almost as, why would you spend your time playing in this meta, like this non-physical world, this virtual reality of sorts, right? But then as they gradually grew more and more, you saw the influence of what was video games being put into things such as movies, the idea of HUDs, the ideas of different sort of icons popping up, like cell phone notifications, things of that sort. Those were all taken from video games. Some of the different action styles and things in movies such as John Wick, that was also taken from video games. So the influence of video games gradually got bigger and bigger to the point where it's like now you have things like Grand Theft Auto, which could pull in $7 billion. I think the idea of the franchise, you look at something like Fast and Furious, we're on Fast and Furious 11. How do we go from street racing to doing CIA involved? Like, it doesn't make any sense, but it goes to show you the power of storytelling and creation. From the first GTAs, which were a bird's eye view, to GTA 3, which opened up the 3D aspect of Grand Theft Auto, and then GTA 4, Vice City, 5, 6, and then 6 is about to come on now. It just goes to show you like this ever-expanding world that is GTA. So kudos to Rockstar, man.
They estimate in a 2-month window, Grand Theft Auto 6 will ship 85 million copies at $80 per game. The team at Convoy also factored in GTA Plus subscriptions, which they estimate will skyrocket when GTA 6 is released. As of 2025, Grand Theft Auto 5 has sold 215 million copies, and it just took 3 days for them to reach $1 billion in sales. Within a single day, 11 million copies were sold. Grand Theft Auto 6 arguably has more hype behind it than Grand Theft Auto 5 did, given the trailers for the game have already broken viewership records twice. There's a bigger, hungrier audience, the technological leaps seem even more monumental, and Rockstar is playing the marketing game perfectly. That, my friends, is a lot of money, but funny enough, it wasn't the number that caught my attention, it was who was doing the predicting. The firm behind that number is Convoy Ventures, a venture capitalist firm that is focused on video games and emergent tech. They don't make games, they build funds, influence investment strategies, and funnel capital into early-stage startups, all while helping to set industry-wide expectations. And they are not alone. Alongside a slew of mutual funds, VCs, and institutional investors, firms like Convoy have warped the trajectory of AAA game development by treating anomalies like Grand Theft Auto as a baseline. They are all a part of the same apparatus that projected that the video game industry would see infinite growth during what they called the new normal of COVID lockdowns, all of which failed, leading to industry-wide layoffs and game cancellations. This needs to be said, it's not developers asking for billion-dollar launches, it's not the writers or artists or designers that are scoping their games for mass market appeal. That pressure is coming from the top, from firms that are managing hundreds of billions of dollars in assets, projecting 8% annual growth on an industry that is already nearing $300 billion in market cap. These investment firms aren't looking for sustainable returns. They are benchmarking success.
I don't know who is playing the game right now, so this man is yapping, but the nigga who's playing the game right now is complete trash.
It's outliers and assuming that every investment can follow suit. If GTA 5 can do it, why can't you? And that mindset is destroying this industry right now. These investment firms are often targeting established publishers like EA, Tencent, Activision Blizzard, Ubisoft, companies that are big enough to be able to absorb the risk, at least for now. And once they're invested, they want growth. Constant, aggressive, exponential growth, not just profitability, growth. That's why we've seen games as a service take over the last couple of years, because reoccurring revenue models are much easier to be able to forecast and
Yeah, but it ruins the fun of it. It ruins it, okay? We're ruined by it. You guys are ruining us. Having all this nonsense going on here, dude. These capital firms, all they want is money, growth, expenditure, growth, continued growth over a projected period of time. It's like, dude, come on, man. Niggas can't make games like they used to in their garage. What happened to the love of making games in your garage for the fun of gaming, for the fun of game development? And now you gotta make games for the venture-backed capitalist that wants a 10% return, APR return on his finances. You guys are ridiculous, man.
monetized at scale. So investor logic says, go big or go home. Suddenly your games just can't be fun anymore. They need to be sticky, scalable, monetizable, commodifiable. And that's how you get these games that have $400 million development budgets and games that sell millions of copies but still fail to meet expectations. And when a firm like Convoy goes public with a $7.6 billion sales projection, it doesn't just set expectations for Grand Theft Auto 6, it moves the goalposts for everybody else. Other studios and other games are going to get compared to that figure. Other publishers are going to get asked why their portfolio is not performing at that same level. Suddenly, every shooter now needs to be Fortnite, every open world game needs to be GTA, and every roadmap is drawn with that fantasy in mind. I mean, look no further than EA reportedly planning for Battlefield 6 to reach 100 million users. That is 5 times the sales of Battlefield 1, the highest selling entry in the franchise, which topped out at around 21 million copies sold. In the 23 years of Battlefield, the entire franchise hasn't even hit 100 million. But now, they think after the disaster of Battlefield 2042 that they're going to somehow pull in 100 million people. What are you thinking? How do you believe these snake oil salesmen? Sure, part of that projection is because they're going to have a free-to-play Battle Royale mode that's meant to mimic Call of Duty. But there's always been a difference between those two games. Battlefield has never been Call of Duty. It's always been slower, more tactical, and more team-based. It's always had a more niche audience. It's still been a big game, just not that big. And instead of leaning into
right, this is the problem when you're dealing with things like money. The idea of creativity now gets sucked out the window. Some of these games take time to develop their viewership or their user base. You look at things like Fable, it has that sort of cult following. There's different games that have that sort of cult following which are really niche. Dragon Origins, things like that, they have their niche following. And when you try to spice things up too much to get involved with the first week numbers, first month numbers of how many copies the game is going to sell, it's like, listen guys, we're not in the rap industry, okay? We're not concerned about going platinum in the first week. That's not what this is about. This is about creating games that are classic and fun for the people to play them, and that are supposed to stand the test of time. Not this money grab of how much money can we make off people, bro, because that's how you ruin games. You look at things like the 2K series, how they have those in-game purchases that you have to make your player better. Like, what happened to being able to buy a game, put it into the system, the console, and play it from start to finish without any worrying of having to buy add-ons to finish the game? It's at the point now where you can't even beat a game unless you actually make in-app purchases. And I think that in itself is ridiculous, bro.
The things that make that game great, what made it resonate with its core audience, they are now chasing the same trends as everybody else. We need to be the next Fortnite. You know they poured money into this thing. I guarantee $500 million or more. They've consolidated all of their Battlefield studios to work on this one game. Even created a Battlefield lab system to be able to get feedback in real time before the game was even in alpha. All of which they have ignored. Players said that they wanted meaningful classes, specialization, and a return to identity, and what they're getting instead is a flat system. No class restrictions, no unique weapon loadouts, everyone's going to be running the same guns, all in the name of accessibility. Not because they think it makes the game better, but because someone, somewhere, thinks it's going to help them hit that 100 million player number. This isn't about players, this isn't about developers. These decisions are being driven by mutual funds, investment firms, and executive leadership that could not care less whether the game is actually good or not, because they can't hear you through the money. But these expectations are not reasonable. They're fantasies being sold to shareholders, inflated by analysts, and then parroted by the media, all so the people at the top can cash out before the ship hits the rocks. In most cases, the money that's behind these projections is coming from elite investors who are essentially just playing blackjack with the lives of developers and customers. They manipulate sentiment, pump up the hype, and then they pull their money out just as the stock hits its peak. That's why you often see a publisher stock drop the minute after a game releases, because the people that are driving this cycle were never in it for the long haul. They're not here to build sustainable studios or good games. They just want to gamble. And the fallout, well, that lands squarely with the developers whose work gets scrapped, the studios that get shuttered, and the players that are stuck paying more for less. This is not just bad forecasting, it's manufactured pressure. From budget to scope to the tone of the marketing campaign, the product gets warped to serve somebody else's fantasy, and everybody else gets left holding the bag.
But this is the standard ideology that is involved in any sort of industry that involves money being circulated around. When you look at things like the music industry, you'll have this artist who spent all this time developing their talent and skill, and then they've been able to amass a mass following on the internet without any sort of backing or any sort of label, right? So once the artist now has this notoriety, then the labels want to come in and say, okay, well, we'll give you that next step, we'll give you that next push to be able to go on and do what you need to be able to do. But now that they've invested all this money into you, this idea of being able to do the things that you were known for kind of go out the window. Because most albums, when you're involved with making an album, albums have to be commercially viable. So maybe you were taking a lot of experimental risks as an artist to get your work out there in front of the people. But now that there's people involved who are investing their money in your work and they need their returns on it, you're not going to be able to do things that are too artistic. You kind of have to follow the mold, which is why a lot of people's release or albums kind of sound very dumbed down, because it's gone, what we would say has gone mainstream, right? It has that mainstream sound, is because the album is now made safe and has been made for consumerism to be used on a mass market. Same thing with the video games, same aspects, same ideologies.
I'm so exhausted. How do you guys not see what you're doing to yourself? These guys have to be addicts. That's the only thing that makes sense. That's why they're so high on AI right now, because it's the hot term. It brings in investors, and it could be the silver bullet that takes care of their budgeting issue that they have, that they're using to be able to chase these outlier successes that I just do not think you can compete with. I mean, look at Battle Royale right now. It's essentially the exact same games and has been the same games ever since the entire fad took on. Apex Legends, Call of Duty Warzone, Fortnite, PUBG. There really hasn't been anything else that's entered into that conversation. If anything, some of those are starting to lose popularity, and it's just entropy more than anything else. We've seen so many games come for the throne, not a single one has made it. That's why I asked the question, do players even want it? These guys aren't asking that. I think some of them are, and they're coming up with the wrong answer. They're saying extraction shooter, and the reason why they're coming up with that answer is because they're not asking the question for the players, they're asking it for their investors. The problem is these guys are looking at edge cases. They're looking at cultural phenomenons, and they're saying that this is how much video games can make. But they don't make that kind of money. You know, last year, over 20,000 video games released, or almost 20,000 video games released.
Damn.
50 of them were high-profile games. How many of them actually made it? How many of them actually did well? How many of them did insane? You're benchmarking yourself against statistical anomalies. That's not sustainable. Even if you can recreate the quality, you can't recreate engagement. That's why I think that these investment strategies and all of these analytics that these guys are using right now is driving this industry into the ground, because it's antithetical to the very industry itself. One of this year's most popular games is about selling drugs and riding around on a skateboard. You cannot predict that. That is not something that you can merely just recreate. All you can do is just make something good, make it for the right reasons, keep your expectations in check, and hope for the best.
Right? But that has always been the case for anything creative, anything artistic. It's always that. It's, you want to be able to make the best kind of work that you can without any sort of outside ideas or opinions or ideologies of the men in suits. Because once the suits get involved, everything loses its soul, its essence, gets completely sapped out of everything, because the men in suits need a return on their investment. The return on the investment from an artistic standpoint is the sacrifice that the person puts into developing their game, making the graphics, creating the storylines, crafting these characters. They're sacrificing essences of themselves to make this thing and to present it to the user, who will probably deem it a good game or not. But who can say what will go number one? That is to the audience, right? So for people to just come in and expect a game to do crazy numbers, it's like expecting every startup to be a unicorn. And that isn't the case, which is why most investors, when they do invest in startups, they'll probably invest in 20 different startups, knowing that they'll have one company that will have that $1 billion evaluation, right? Where else the most of those startups that he invested in will completely go bankrupt. And that's the case. We have to get back to just the sheer creativity of everything. And this isn't just in the video game industry. This is across all industries. We are seeing this. We are seeing this bastardization of everything based on just money funneling in. Money. No, stop. Get back to the fun. Get back to what made things great. All right? Enough yapping, guys. Y'all got me yapping hard. Huh?